Welcome to episode 2 of Westbrooke's COVID Conversation series. Joining us today is the Managing Director and Founder of South Africa's fastest growing hotel group, Marc Wachsberger. Marc's going to be joining us today to discuss a little bit more around the South African hospitality and tourism industries with a particular focus on his business, the Capital Hotel Group. Marc, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure thing.
Marc, definitely interesting and difficult times for the hospitality sector. We've obviously just come down and out of level 5 lockdown. Level 4 doesn't seem to have brought much different for the hospitality industry, although it does seem that the Capital Hotel Group, through its isolation facilities idea, has managed to weather the storm in some way. How have things been?
So we were the first to take action in the hotel group of pivoting our business into what is essentially going to be the new norm for a long time, which is low demand from regular domestic and international travel, low to no demand, and now saying, well, what market is out there? And that market is what we say is an isolation market. So these are people who need to stay with us in order to isolate in a safe place. And it's gone well because when the president gave his first address, we had already pivoted our business to introduce huge sanitization measures, which is now a norm in the market. But what that then did is it allowed us to win repatriation flights, other kind of isolation businesses, other essential service businesses, just by being seen to be proactive in creating these safe spaces for clients.
And Marc, just a quick one. How well has it gone if you look at your occupancies now relative to what they would have been pre-COVID? Has this been a viable measure in the interim period?
It's been a reduction of losses measure. We've been doing about 35% of our normal budgeted revenue, which is significant given that a lot of hotels would have done zero. And I think have done zero, they've just closed. But on the other hand, it's a reduction of losses because even though our occupancy is actually quite high at about, call it 45, 50% on average, the rates have come crashing down because essentially in any oversupply scenario, you start getting into price wars. The hotel industry is famous for price wars. And unfortunately, I think that that's the biggest issue looming on the horizon as we get to level 3, 2, and 1. You know, essentially hotels will open, but you're not going to see, with the borders closed, you're not going to see all the hotels opening into their full external demand. And so a price war will naturally ensue. And we're trying to work with government at the moment to get them to stop that from happening. But unfortunately, I think it's going to happen.
And Marc, how's the engagement process gone with government? Have they been receptive to the idea?
I haven't engaged directly with government. I'm engaging through FedHasa and the Tourism Business Council. They like the idea and they need to take it up with government. I think government at the moment is a bit inundated with all sorts of other applications. And I think that unfortunately the tourism minister is not someone who has covered herself so Fortunately, I'm not unbelievably hopeful that government will come to the party. But on the other hand, if they don't, I mean, we're seeing an industry that's going to go absolutely crashing if there isn't some assistance.
And Marc, so out of your facilities that you own and manage, how many of them have you managed to convert into isolation facilities? Have you had to close some of them?
Yeah, we've had to close 3 of our properties. We've had to we've had approval only on the balance, and that balance operates as isolation facilities, which is 7 properties.
And has your isolation idea at least allowed you to retain your staff and to continue paying them? Have you had to look at retrenchments at all, potentially suspending employment for a period of time?
Yeah, it's unrealistic, unfortunately, to think there aren't going to be layoffs. We've done it in the form of layoffs. We ran a Section 189 process, but then gave a very strong mitigant to that process, which was to say, take the layoffs, and that our objective is essentially to produce as much revenue as possible to bring as many staff in. And we've done a great job of that. So we have more staff working for us at the moment than probably any other hotel group, simply because we're open and producing revenue. But it's not enough to cover the full staff complement. If you think about in our hotel group of 550 direct employees and another 250 indirect, if you don't have banquets happening, then how can you have the banqueting staff there? So unfortunately, there have had to have been layoffs, but the TERS benefit has kicked in. We got paid yesterday. And so all of that's being passed on to our employees. And of course, because the industry's in lockdown still through level 4, level 3, it only opens in level 2. As we are to read it now, the TERS benefit will kick into our employees for those levels as well, which I think is as long as 4 or 5 months.
So Mark, clearly not as bad a picture for the Capital Hotel Group, having been able to pivot into the isolation facility market. Not every hotelier is as fortunate as you. Maybe just talking or turning a little bit to the industry, how much longer do you think the industry can remain closed for before we start to see real pain?
Probably 1 or 2 more months. The industry is not a strong industry. It wasn't strong pre-COVID. So we originally ran our models realized it's going to be an 18 to 24 month issue, because even when, call it the hit of COVID passes, you still are just in this low demand environment, this oversupply, low demand, price war environment. And I think that it's going to be a long time. You need the borders to open for hotels to get back into business. And they say that'll only open really where there's a vaccine or a proper treatment. So I think, unfortunately, it's a long time away. And I think that a lot of hotels are going to go into distress in 1 or 2 months. They should, in theory, run out of money.
Maybe one last question, Mark, is now that we do at least have the prospect of potentially opening up into the future, if we were to sort of reduce to level 3, even level 2 or 1, are you convinced that we'll go back to business as usual? Or if not, what would be the change in your view in consumer behavior going forward? And how can the hotel industry adapt to maybe withstand that?
Well, I think that, as everything's driven by how long the lockdown continues, because the more and more pain that we put onto ourselves, the longer the recovery. If we can get out of lockdown quicker, I think really like to get these borders open. It's a totally different scenario, base case scenario that we're working to, which is a bad scenario, which is that the borders remain closed. Like I say, in that scenario, the price war is the biggest issue, because think about it. You have 5-star Cape Town hotels that have relied on international travel. So what do? They chase a limited domestic market. That limited domestic market is corporates who say, okay, we don't have any money anymore. We've been through COVID. It's tough. And they play one hotel group off another, including these beautiful 5-star properties who are now taking 3-star rates, and the 3 stars are having 1-star through the industry. And what you'll find is that, unfortunately, the price war is the biggest recovery issue, not anything else.
Interesting. You mentioned that TERS has paid out for your staff. Have there been any other government schemes implemented that you've seen so far that are realistic potential avenues for you to get liquidity in your business? Have the banks come to the party?
So we're too big for this 300 million rand bank scheme at the moment, but I think that was a good one otherwise. Would have liked to have taken that up. And I think that a lot of smaller hotel groups will obviously be able to take that up. The 50 million. 250 million is going to be allocated only to BEE right now. We know 250 million ain't going to cut it. That's going to go maybe 50,000 rand per establishment, like call it B&B kind of establishments. So, government, we're working now with FedHasa to present to government a proper relief package, because the numbers are going to be staggering in the tourism industry.
Marc, does the advent and the rise of Airbnb, do you see that as a competitor to your business? Is that also something that further adds to the price war that you speak of? Yeah,
so remember, we're competitive because we have the ability to pivot. As an owner-operator, we've been an entrepreneurial group, we can pivot. And the other competitive advantage we have is we have apartments, not just standard hotel rooms. Those apartments of ours is something that we want to move into taking longer-term residential leases through this period. But it's at the same time that all the Airbnbs are resorting back to chasing that longer-term residential market as well, and the same time that a lot of expats have just left the country who were occupying furnished apartments. So unfortunately, the price war will rage in that sector as well.
Marc, maybe just in closing, what does all of this mean for the future of the Capital Hotel Group? And sort of, you obviously expanding aggressively before COVID. Will that change going into the future, or will you simply pivot the model into different regions?
So right now, our objective is to survive and then to thrive. Survival, right now, we're on a good trajectory. We've managed to get in some business. As I've said, we've managed to cut our costs drastically. So we think we're going to survive. And then obviously coming out of that will inevitably be the opportunities for growth. The opportunity to go and assist distressed properties, recapitalize them, help with a bit of remanagement if necessary, help their ability to pivot. And then coming out of that, I think we'll see an incredible re-employment in the industry. And ultimately, if you look at this in 3 or 4 years, I think it represents an opportunity for a strong, and for the strong, and unfortunately for the weak, I think it represents it's heading into distress.
Marc, thank you so much for the time, and we hope, as all South Africans, that the hotel industry locally is able to survive this. We know how important it is to the job creation in our country and the importance that tourism has on our economic growth. That's Marc Wachsberger, the founder and managing director of the Capital Hotels and Apartments. If you're looking for an isolation facility, get in touch with the Capital during this time. They have many of their facilities open to assist. And Marc, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.